There's a famous quote often attributed to Peter Drucker: "What gets measured gets managed." And in many ways, that idea sits at the center of this entire series. Because throughout this mini-series, we've discussed recurring surplus, liquidity, leverage, investing, adaptability, optionality, and strategic capital allocation. But eventually, every household reaches the same critical question: where do we actually stand? Not emotionally, not socially, not aspirationally, but structurally. Because ultimately, strong systems are not merely hopeful or disciplined, they are measurable. And this is where adaptive financial architecture evolves again, from conceptual systems thinking into quantitative benchmarking. Without benchmarking, financial systems often drift emotionally, socially, or reactively. Consumption expands gradually, liquidity deteriorates invisibly, investing becomes inconsistent, leverage accumulates slowly, optionality compresses silently. And because there are no targets, thresholds, or structural measurements, the household may not recognize fragility until volatility arrives. This is critically important because adaptive systems are not built through vague intentions, they are built through measurable structural targets. One of the limitations of traditional personal finance is that most metrics are viewed independently. But adaptability is multidimensional. A household can be strong operationally but weak strategically, or high income but dangerously overleveraged, or strong liquidity but severely underinvested for the future. This is why adaptive benchmarking requires integrated structural visualization. And this is where the spider diagram of optionality becomes extremely powerful, because it allows the household to visualize balance, asymmetry, structural weakness, and future flexibility simultaneously. Strong systems display large, balanced geometric expansion. Fragile systems display compressed, distorted geometry. The shape itself reveals the architecture of adaptability. The first major benchmark category is recurring surplus strength. This measures operational adaptability, liquidity generation capacity, and margin for error. The formula is recurring surplus ratio is equal to the net income before financing charges divided by income. Example benchmark ranges might look like this. A ratio below 5% is critically fragile. From 5 to 15%, weak adaptability. From 15 to 25%, moderate resilience. From 25 to 40%, strong adaptive capacity. And above 40%, exceptional optionality generation. This changes the conversation dramatically, because now the household can measure operational flexibility directly. The second benchmark category is liquidity runway. This measures uncertainty survivability, volatility absorption, and adaptive time flexibility. The formula is liquidity runway is equal to liquid assets divided by monthly recurring outflows. The possible benchmark ranges include less than 1 month, critically fragile, 1 to 3 months, weak resilience, 3 to 6 months, moderate adaptability, 6 to 12 months, strong optionality, and 12 plus months, exceptional flexibility. Because liquidity is not merely cash, it is time flexibility. The third benchmark category is fixed cost rigidity. This measures operating leverage, lifestyle inflexibility, and structural fragility. The formula is fixed cost ratio is equal to fixed costs divided by income. Unlike recurring surplus, higher fixed cost ratios reduce adaptability. Fixed costs compress future optionality, increase dependence on stable income, and amplify volatility exposure. Strong systems therefore maintain controlled structural rigidity. The fourth benchmark category is future state funding adequacy. This measures whether the household is actually funding the future it claims to want. The formula becomes funding adequacy ratio is equal to the actual monthly investing divided by the required monthly investing. Many households appear operationally stable while simultaneously being strategically underfunded. This creates invisible future fragility. The fifth benchmark category is leverage pressure. This measures how much of the household structure is dependent on debt financing. And this is different from fixed costs generally. Fixed costs measure recurring rigidity. Leverage pressure specifically measures debt dependency, required financing payments, interest burden, refinancing exposure, and vulnerability to income disruption. A useful benchmark could be leverage pressure ratio, which is equal to total required debt payments divided by income. This includes required payments on mortgages, vehicle loans, credit cards, student loans, lines of credit, and other recurring financial obligations. The higher this ratio becomes, the less adaptable the system becomes. Because debt payments are not optional, they must be serviced regardless of whether income falls, expenses rise, or uncertainty increases. This is why leverage pressure belongs on the spider diagram. A household can have strong income, but still have weak optionality if too much of that income is already committed to financing obligations. In an adaptive system, leverage must be controlled carefully, because leverage can accelerate progress, but it can also amplify fragility. The sixth benchmark category is income resilience. This is the missing piece that completes the spider diagram. Because even if a household has strong recurring surplus, solid liquidity, controlled fixed costs, manageable leverage, and decent investing capacity, the system can still be fragile if the income engine itself is fragile. Income resilience measures income stability, income diversification, skill portability, industry cyclicality, dependence on one employer, and the ability to replace income if disrupted. This matters enormously. A household dependent on one income source in a cyclical industry has a very different skill profile than a household with two stable incomes, portable skills, side income, investment income, or business income. A possible scoring structure could be qualitative at first. Income structure with one unstable source. The interpretation here could be high fragility. One stable source, moderate. Two stable sources, stronger resilience. Multiple sources, higher resilience, and multiple scalable sources, exceptional optionality. So the one unstable source may be rated a 1, and the multiple scalable sources might be rated a 5. This benchmark completes the framework because it measures the strength of the system's inflow engine. And without a resilient income engine, every other benchmark becomes more vulnerable. At this point, the adaptive financial benchmarking framework has 6 core dimensions: recurring surplus strength, liquidity runway, total fixed cost ratio, leverage pressure, funding adequacy, income resilience. Together, these form the 6-dimensional optionality map. The ideal system appears as a large, balanced hexagon. A fragile system appears compressed, distorted, or uneven. And that shape matters because the spider diagram does not merely show wealth, it shows adaptive capacity. A household may have high income but poor optionality. Another household may have moderate income but strong structural resilience. The spider diagram makes that visible. It shows where the household is strong, where it is exposed, and where optionality is being compressed. Once the 6 dimensions are measured, they can be combined into an optionality score. This score is not meant to measure status, it is not meant to measure lifestyle, and it is not simply a measure of net worth. It measures adaptive capacity. In other words, can the system absorb shocks? Can the system keep investing? Can the system survive volatility? Can the system avoid forced decisions? Can the system preserve future choice? That is what the optionality score is trying to capture. This is why benchmarking matters, because without a clear scorecard, households may confuse visible wealth with structural strength. But strong systems are not just visible, they are measurable. In this episode, we introduced the adaptive financial benchmarking framework. We moved from vague financial goals into measurable structure. And we established 6 core dimensions of household optionality: recurring surplus strength, liquidity runway, total fixed cost rigidity, leverage pressure, funding adequacy, and income resilience. Together, these dimensions form the optionality map, a visual representation of how adaptive, fragile, balanced, or constrained a financial system truly is. But understanding the framework conceptually is only the first step, because the real objective is not merely measuring the system, it is strengthening the system. And that's where this series now goes next. In the coming episodes, we'll take a deep dive into each individual dimension separately. We'll examine target benchmark ranges, optimization strategies, structural trade-offs, hidden fragility patterns, and the specific behaviors that strengthen or weaken adaptive capacity over time. Because strong systems are not improved randomly. They are strengthened dimension by dimension. And ultimately, the goal is not merely higher income or visible wealth. The goal is expanding future optionality. Because the strongest systems are not simply built to survive, they are built to preserve future freedom.